Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. I'm going to be sharing from a particular chapter tonight of a book called Psychology and Kabbalah, or Kabbalah. The title is simply called Archetypes, and this is chapter 40 of the particular book. I've been reading through this book for the last probably 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks, and I want to continue on with this. Again, today is the 21st day of November. I think that's right. Yes, it is the 21st day of November, 2025. The notion of archetypes is an old one. The personification of principles occurs throughout mythology. Some archetypes are broad, others particularly that is, many include lesser principles within their orbit, and a few personified a very specific aspect of reality or fantasy. In the ancient world, when mankind was in its infancy and could not understand the forces at work in the universe except as magical, it defined the unseen in symbols, not symbols. Now, why some of these symbols were just superstitious impressions of the unknown. Others were carefully considered concepts cast in the language of poetry and art. The fact that most of humanity may have been ignorant does not mean they were not people of high development. Such men as Leo Tessisil in China, Akhenaten in Egypt, and Homer in Greece were saints and sages who were responsible for leading mankind towards a realization that there was more to life than survival. They synthesized what they had received in mystical vision or had concluded after long contemplation, and they presented these concepts in the forms of symbols that indicated and explained the profound order of existence as it related to mankind. These realizations went into the collective unconscious as stories, sayings, buildings, sculpture, paintings, dance, and drama, which contain archetype principles. At certain points in history, various esoteric schools formulated complete systems based upon the character and effect of the major principles that govern the world. The astrologers produce, for example, 5 distinct archetypes based upon the observable planets, as well as 2 very complex symbologies about the sun and moon. For instance, one aspect of the lunar character was expressed by Artemis, Artemis, the many-breasted goddess who presented the moon's fullness in relation to the fecundity of nature. Diane, the slender maiden hunter, with her crescent-shaped bow, symbolized the junction of the cycle between death and rebirth. As Selene, the moon was worshipped by Pan, the god of nature, but she loved Endymion, symbol of humanity, upon whom she gazed with adoration as he slept. This myth spoke of the Usada-ego level of mankind and its unawakening state. Hecate, the great sorcerer, was the symbol of moon magic, which had the power to influence the ego's view of reality and represented the lower mind. Buried in these myths is much information about the workings of the psyche. Artemis and Diana are the light and shadow poles of the ego, and libido and mortido impulses. The Selene principle is the ego's dominion over nature or the body, while Hecate's capacity for directing highly cathetics images speaks of applied imagination and conscious projections. This and much more can be gleaned by examining mythology, as Jung indeed did. Figure 42, archetypes. In this case, we use the characters of the Bible. At the bottom is David, the man of blood and passion. The ego is symbolized by Joseph. His coat of many colors represented aspects of the sub-personalities. Aaron and Moses here were the Aaron and Moses here were the pillars that kept the unmature children of Israel on the straight and narrow. While Isaac and Abraham represented fear and love. Jacob, who became Israel, depicts the impossible transformation of the self. Adam and Eve are the ultimate father and mother figures. Metatron, that is, alias of Enoch, could be put in the place of Plato, while the crown of Neptune can have no image of the deity. As regards Kabbalah, the same applies, except here a system of anthropology archetypes are used. This is because the characters in the Bible have names that describe their function. Joshua, for example, means, quote, deliverer, end quote, and David, quote, the beloved, end quote, while Ruth, that is the loyal daughter-in-law of Naomi, means, quote, friendship, and Ahithophel, the evil counselor who advised Absalom to rebel against his father David, actually means, quote, brother of folly, end quote. So these names, as I've done before in the Bible, have meaning behind them. It's just not simply just names. Okay. This was done by purpose, you see. These and many other biblical people represent certain principles which act out specific roles, even as Joshua or Jesus of Nazareth embodied the idea of the divine man who would deliver a Roman-dominated Judea, which represented humanity imprisoned by physicality. In terms of the tree, Kabbalists place biblical archetypes on it according to their nature, so that David, the earthly but divine inspired king, represented the body, or Makut, the kingdom, the lowest of the Sephiroth, while Joseph, the dreamer who had the coat of many colors and became the visitor to Pharaoh, was seen as the symbol of Yesod, or the minister of the ego. Moses and Aaron were put at the bottom of the right and left pillar as they had to deal with the day-to-day problems of the years in the wilderness, where life was at a basic level. Moses was placed in Nazah as the practical prophet, and Aaron in Hod, for he was the silver-tongued speaker and priest. Isaac was placed in the Sephiroth of Jabal, for he feared the judgment of the Lord. Abraham, the friend of God, was placed at Hesed, H-E-S-E-D, the loving and forgiving Sephiroth, while the third patriarch, Jacob, was assigned to Tipharel, which is the position of the self, which he was transformed into Israel, which means, quote, he who struggles with or for God, end quote. The non-Sephiroth of Da has no human image, although the archangel Gabriel is said sometimes to be seen through its darkest glass. You remember that Da means simply knowledge. Keter, the crown, I should say, has no symbol either, for it was not permitted to have an image of the divine. Anad and Hokum have the archetypes of Eve and Eve and Adam ascribed to them as the female and male heads of the outer pillars. This brings us to the two of Jung's most important archetypes, the anima and the animus, that have these roots in the soul and spiritual mate idea. The anima and animus correspond to what Kabbalists call the Eve and Adam principles, who represent the passive and the active sides of the tree. Okay, so this would be simply another way of saying it. Simply is I'm trying to think of it now. Just something dropped in my mind to do with you're talking about passive and active. One is simply grace, and the other one is I know these things. One is mercy, I should say, and the other one simply is to do with I lack the word right now. I'm sorry. According to the youngest, and this according to some youngest, the Animus is the masculine in women, and the anima is the feminine in men. In fact, both are present in each individual, but the sex opposite to the person is hidden in their unconscious. A man works from the right hand column while his left operates unconsciously, and vice versa in woman, or women, I should say. The anima and the animus archetypes play an enormous part in how we act. I'm trying to find that book here, like quick, so I can tell you what I'm looking for. Hold on just a second here. Oh, the word is severity. One is mercy, and the other one is severity. Sorry for that. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. Let's see where we're at here. In fact, both are present in each individual, but the sex opposite to the person is hidden in their unconscious. A man works from the right hand column while his left operates unconsciously, and vice versa in women. The anima and animus archetypes play an enormous part in how we act, how we respond in the world, and in our attitudes to ourselves in our relationships in the most obvious and important area, namely the intimate communication between the sexes. The archetype Eve is in the man, and Adam in the woman seeks out its opposite in a mate who is the mirror of their interior image. When there is a sufficiently close correspondence between a man inner Eve and a woman's inner Adam, these occur the phenomenon of projection and counterprojection experienced in love affairs that raise the relationship out of the mundane into another world. Kabbalistically, this is quite precise, as love lifts the physical aspect of their intimate encounter into the magical Zarati world of archetypes, where every slightest gesture and word takes on a poignant and symbolic meaning. The psychological level of communication is why a psyche connection is often made between lovers who can perceive what is happening to each other, even though an ocean may divide them. The world of Yazara has a different kind of time and space. This is where the psyche has its being, and the reason why love can be a paradise or a purgatory. In Kabbalah, each of the sephirah has two aspects, a positive and a negative, or a good and an evil side. The pillars can also reverse these changes, and the male can become passive, and the woman can become active. This reverse aspect was recognized by Jung. That is Carl Jung, for example. A overreactive right pillar or animus can drive a woman unconsciously to take on aggressive attitudes towards life, and especially towards men if she is convinced that they wish to dominate her. On the other hand, her assertive animus may operate in another way by seeking out a man of a more primitive level who will express and match her underdeveloped Adam within. Illustration of this was the normally prim Danish career girl who once a year went south to the topless beaches of Spain in order to have 2 weeks of unadulterated sensuality with the local fishermen before returning to her sedate banking job. Her Viking impulse had been satisfied. Conversely, there was the young man who fell in love with, but was rejected by his dream girl, who was frightened by his obsession for her. He pinned for her over many years until they met again in their hometown. By then, she had lost her youth and golden hair. She was plump, cynical, and exhausted by mundanity. Suddenly, he wondered what he had ever seen in her. She no longer fit his prince's image. The full horror came when he realized that he had missed several opportunities to marry because his animate projection had blocked his view of what a real woman was. Modern advertising exploits the power of the projection, that is, in constant presentations of beautiful women and potent men who symbolize the form and energy of the outer pillars. This projection can come from any of the functional sephiroths so that this or that quality can be emphasized in a particular archetype. Thus, for example, Jabra can be evoked by a battle of Britain's fighter pilot with his stoic courage, while Nazar can turn a certain fashion model into the rage of the season. Here it should be noted that each pillar has a subdivision of masculine and feminine, so that Banal, for example, can be the great grandmother or the Saturnine philosopher, while Hokum can produce the archetype of the great prophet or prophetess of wisdom. It is interesting to note that Jungians, that is Carl Jung followers, observe 4 levels of animus and anima, which correspond to the 4 Kabbalistic levels. The first is the, quote, he-man, hero, or natural woman who have a strong sensitive appeal, that is, to them. The second, the romantic poet or sensitive girl who evoke a psychological rather than a physical reaction. The third is the man with a master mind, and the profound woman who symbolizes a spiritual wisdom and understanding. The highest order is exemplified by the limited animus and animate figures who are not just images, but actually live what they think, feel, and do. All these levels and many more aspects of the animus and animate polarity from a higher, complicated, and yet essentially simple complementary, that is a complementary system that operates between men and women as they work within themselves and with each other in the pursuit of balance in their respective trees. This comes according to the Kabbalah when the Adam and Eve of each partner are face to face in a mutual as well as a internal union. Jung would call this the integration of the masculine and feminine. In Kabbalah, it is seen as the, quote, the marriage of the king and queen, end quote. The major Jungian archetypes, when placed upon the tree, correspond almost exactly, although the terms may be different. For example, Carl Jung's great king would be placed in the Hesed. His archetype of the hero is certainly Jara. The beautiful maid or youth is, without doubt, Nezahan, while the trickster clearly fits with Had. These archetypes occur in many guises, but the great king is always merciful and generous, and the warrior courageous and discriminating, which are the qualities of Hesed and Jara, or the reverse if the dark side of the Sephiroth are being invoked. The same is true of all the other archetypes. For example, the trickster can appear in the Joker, as a Joker, or clever crook, delightful wag, or the sinister spy, using every aspect and skill of Had to juggle, scheme, and outwit the good or bad opponent. These archetypes crop up not only in dreams, but in politics, business, and family situations. They can also occur in myths, such as are found in the cinema or the theater. The old Western movie, for example, usually contains a cool Jaravanti hero and Hesed and rich rancher with a beautiful deserted daughter and a bent Hadenan lawyer or gang leader. Yeah, that sounds about right. That is why the Westerns has such a folk story appeal, seen in terms of the tree. All great drama is the acting out of the tension between the various archetypes as good and evil aspects are brought into confrontation. For example, every play follows the pattern of first establishing a stable situation, which is suddenly disrupted by an intruding element. And this is what Phil would call the 3-act play here. The first act is where you meet each other, and then you have the drama of good and evil. And then the second part simply is the working out of that in the drama that's going on, pitting one against the other, so to speak. And eventually you have the end of it, which is the third act, is that everything comes together. The plot that unfolds a developing sequence in which the conflict between normality and disharmony is brought to a climax. Equilibrium is restored, be it by Hamlet's finally taking action or the arrival of the U.S. cavalry to the rescue. These archetype situations find echoes both in society at large and within the individual psyche, as they are moved from an old and fixed position into a new dynamic phase by crises that are often precipitated by evil archetypes symbols, such as the Jiraiya Terrace, Nezatin Seductus, a banal dictator, or Hokum's type, what we call a mad genius. The realm of the archetypes is the world of Yazara. Here, collectively and personally experienced, manifest in countless forms, expressing the interrelation of the 10 sephirah or of the psychological tree. As such, they may be combinations or the pure essence of an archetype that can be projected onto a external situation, or be part of a private fantasy. The ever-changing, watery nature of Zariah does not allow any fixity to occur, as this fluidity is vital in order to meet the constant shifting world of thoughts, feelings, and actions. Indeed, flexibility is the basis of good mental health, as the mind continually adjusts its balance in order to prevent any psychological stagnation. This leads up to the special archetype of the center pillar that keeps the pivotal balance at each level. The first to be examined is the persona, the mask that covers and protects the ego. So that's the end of chapter 40 tonight. Thank you for being here. If you haven't got a chance, me and Phil did a video yesterday talking about many things, and maybe you can glare over to my channel, Discerning What Is True, and see what we have talked about. We talked about some pretty important things. We talked about the 22 paths, which is involved with Kabbalah. We talked a little bit. We didn't get too much into Revelation, but the book of Revelation has 22 chapters. And we talk about also, we didn't get all the way through with the cards. Let's go with what I'll call the card. The last card we ended with, I should say, is the Wheel of Fortune, which we'll start with that one next time we do a meet together, hopefully next week. But also we didn't get into it very little involved. That is the 22 letters of the Jewish language. Most people are not aware of that. I just happened to find out about that lately. I knew that in the back of my mind, but I just didn't remember, so to speak. So I appreciate you being here. Again, my channel simply is Discerning What Is True. And we just roughly went through a chapter tonight, chapter 40. So thank you for being here, and you take care. We'll see you next time. Thank you.